Hey, welcome back. What do you guys think of the topic of the test? And it's almost an absurd question, isn't it? Have you ever been tested in your life? Of course you have, and you've maybe have the feeling that life is just an ongoing test. You finish one and you move on to the next one. Sometimes you have a multitude of tests all going on at the same time. Sometimes there are brief periods where things are sort of copacetic and status quo, and then here comes the next one and the next one, and just when you think you're done, you get another test, and I think it's a fascinating question that everyone can ask for themselves. Why is life a test? And of course, I'm going to spew something, and that might be perhaps the greatest value of me speaking on it would be how it might stimulate your own understanding and wisdom and growth around the topic of being tested, if you have in fact ever been tested, and if you are being tested right now in some way. So when it comes to the test, the great chapter in the world scripture that has to do with the test is, of course, the story of Job. And, in my media internet ramblings yesterday and between my various projects, occasionally I've got to relax and clear my mind and just browse. And what was sent to me by the cosmic algorithm, for some reason, was a biblical scholar saying that the story of Job in the Bible it's the oldest known book, so to speak. The Bible is not in chronological order. The order of the Bible developed over time in the most unusual and some say chaotic and haphazard way. Others say that it's divinely inspired how it's put together, but be that as it may, the one thing that the Bible is not, whatever you think it is or it isn't, the one thing it isn't for sure is that it's not in chronological order. So the oldest identified book based on science, whether you believe or not, is the book of Job. It's hundreds of years older than the creation stories, the Genesis story. So this was also when writing was not even developed yet. Get that? That just gives me chills to think. The story of Job was around in the mind of man for hundreds of years, and it was being told orally from one generation to the next. The story of Job was so important to the mind of men in the growing up in the world, men and women, of course, that it was just carried from generation to generation to generation as a theme before it was even written down. That's how important the story is. Well, what's the story in Job? It's the test. It's the test of why is there suffering and why is there evil? And the dialogue that goes on in the story of Job. I don't know if you've ever read it or if you've read it recently, and I don't even know if it's part of your spiritual menu, but be that as it may, it's all part of our spiritual menu because each and every one of us, if we're thoughtful souls, we ask the question of why am I tested? Why are we tested? And why is there evil? And the story is so important that it was the very first one in the Bible, and the story resonates to this day. Why are we continuously tested? Well, here we are wrestling with the story, and I think we can make progress with that. Now, as I consider the word test, I decided to look up the synonyms for the word, and there are several based on whether we're using the word test as an adjective, a noun, or a verb. I just kept sifting and sorting, and two words came to mind that I found very helpful for me. The two synonyms for the word test that I found helpful in my understanding, because I'm going through tests right now. I'm sure you are as well. Here are the ones that I like: investigation and adventure. Now, they have a slightly different connotation. Now, if we consider that we're all dollops of God consciousness, and I truly believe that, we're all funnels of infinite consciousness that is funneled down to very small iterations of God, and now we're all expanding back to our full and true nature. Well, if that's the case, we're always growing. We really have no choice. As Einstein said, the more I know, the more I realize I don't know. If if my consciousness has expanded from here to here, then the perimeter of the unknown that I'm expanding into is always getting larger as well. The more I know, the more I don't know. And when I know a little more, the boundary between what I know and what I don't know yet, there's the key. The boundary between what I know and what I can do so far is always expanding. Thus, life will always be an investigation. Life will always be an adventure. Or I could call it a test. I could throw my head back and put my hand on my forehead and just say, God, why are you testing me? And I could lay down in the ashes, and perhaps I have a mate that might even say, just curse God and die already. And that's one way of looking at the test. But I think a perceptual shift of test could really be interesting. I note that it is for me. If I think of my expansion and my growth not being a test imposed upon me by an external agency, God, but I think of a test as an internal dynamic going on inside of me that is a gift from God that brings me back to God, then all of my tests are investigations into the unknown, and they're adventures into adventure. And that is the best news that I can think of. My life is always an investigation. I'm always growing, and damn if it isn't always an adventure. Now, occasionally the test seems to be too strong, but that could just be the case that I found a hell of a fun adventure and a damn good investigation. And I'll conclude with a great line by our friend Helen Keller, who, well, she didn't say this because she didn't speak, but she communicated it dynamically. She said, life is a great adventure, or it's nothing at all. Would you like your life to be free of adventure and investigation? Some people would like that. So they set up very large houses with very large fences, and they try to set up all the conditions so that they're never tested ever again. Is that what you want? Okay. That's the investigation for today, and I'll see you all tomorrow.